So it's known for many people that I have um, a religious membership. So I was baptized and I took baptism in 2022 at um, a church um, near Augusta, Georgia, the New Hope Baptist Church. And um, but there's there's still a lot of things about religion that people need to be aware of and stuff. Um, One being that religion kind of drives people insane and stuff um, for many reasons. There's in in the topic of logical argument, there's notions of academic notions or something that's from a perspective of administration, just looking at paper and stuff. And religion has a tendency to impart language into people that has no coherence or application to the present or the future. Um, and then you have to like do like these mental gymnastics and do all this retranslation to make it apply to um, the present and future. Like for example, like in the book of James, it says God, he makes these things happen again and again. That's from the New Living Translation. That is one of the authentic translations of the Bible and stuff that preserves the original content from the Dead Sea Scrolls and stuff, um, and from the Ethiopian Bible, you know, um, and um, which is, and that becomes a type of insanity because when a person becomes so convinced that something that is logically unprovable, that is not of any real experience or any valid inner experience, um, like meaning any logical inner experience or like a grounded intuition and stuff, or of any scientific fact and stuff, uh, um, and they don't let it go because they believe in it and stuff. That is basically an example of insanity and stuff. That is the lapse in thoughtful thinking and stuff. It is merely just the brain, firing off the connections that are not actually memories of fact or anything like that. It's a type of insanity. It's a psychotic state and stuff that most people are able to enter and stuff because of, and it was demonstrated by the insanity that religion breeds and stuff. And looking at many religious communities, I see people have seen both, both in real life and through research, that these people are become so emotionally unintelligent and stuff, even sadistic, um, so out of control, so adult and everything that um, which is fine if a person doesn't externalize, but they externalize a lot. And now you kind of see the insanity that religion leads to and stuff. If like, because cause here is used in the colloquial sense where it can mean like it leads to whatever and stuff. Um, but yeah, religion drives people insane. Um, and like if you follow the religious way of life and stuff, you're going to find yourself deprived of a lot of experiences that you need and stuff. You might be deprived of a lot of key nutrients and stuff. Religions, almost all religions have respective diets and stuff. Like for example, if you're staunchly Christian and stuff, and you follow the Book of Daniel strictly, but you have a certain autoimmune disorder and stuff, you might need to eat a lot of meat in your diet to hold you over until you find something better. But the Book of Daniel says to eat meat sparingly and stuff. The Book of Daniel is generally good for diet. It advocates a vegetarian, even a vegan diet and stuff. It says to eat it sparingly, so you can always spare it and stuff. You don't have to eat meat and stuff, which is backed up by a lot of nutritional medical science. Like you don't necessarily need meat; you can replace it and take supplements and stuff. B12 supplementation, and iron supplementation, which is perfectly fine. So meat is expensive anyway. Um, Meat tends to be contaminated too. So you know what I'm saying. So um, that's an example of that. But if you're on the wrong diet for too long, oh yeah, you're gonna go insane for sure. It's gonna cause some emotional problems for sure and stuff. It's probably not gonna be the type of insane that a lot of people think of and stuff like when talk about certain conditions um that really don't have a dietary basis to it, like they're just genetic or they're just because of brain damage or whatever, or some introduced chemical or whatever. Uh, y- you know, um, but yeah, uh, religious theory is great to learn. There's a lot of great philosophy and wisdom and stuff, but it makes people crazy. So, um, a lot of criminals have religious affiliation. A lot of criminals were created by religious communities, and a lot of religious communities do such psychologically harmful things to their people and stuff that um that you have to think that it's just like an asylum run by the lunatics, you know. Um, yeah, uh, those religious radicals and stuff that are, you know, constantly causing a disturbance and are often very disagreeable and stuff. Those are not good people. Okay, they really they have a disease of personality and stuff, which comes from poor, weak character, very sheer character and stuff. They drive people crazy. They tell people they're going to hell and stuff, or that God hates them, or uh, or that evolution is wrong and stuff, or them, or they try to discredit science or whatever. Like it's it's a bunch of it's a bunch of senseless nonsense, really. Um, I've met I've met the children of some of these people and stuff. They give me the accounts of how they were, emotionally abused as kids and stuff because their parents were such religious nut jobs and stuff that they can't control themselves. You're gonna tell me that James Carroll wasn't a story of religiously induced mental illness and stuff, or James Carey? No, not yeah, I think it was James Carroll. So, um, damn, I shouldn't have used his name. Um, but yeah, I mean, this story was public. They made a movie about it, um, about how him going through the religious school led to him eventually getting hooked on drugs. You know, he eventually passed away, and rest in peace to him. Um, you know,